And the game of the year is Baldur's Gate 3.
It's finally happened. Dozens of Redfall fans everywhere have been left distraught as Baldur's Gate 3 wins the big prize. It is the game of the year, according to the Game Awards. Now, these industry awards nights, they don't really mean anything. It doesn't matter if it's the Academy Awards, the Golden Globes, the Game Awards. It's all just opinions. But for something like Baldur's Gate 3, it just feels right. The game deserved to win. This wasn't some huge mainstream title that the media were desperate to get in front of everyone. It's a game that gamers fell in love with because of its merits, because of the quality of the title itself. This is a win for everyone. Sure, there were some Nintendo fans crying in their seats because Tears of the Kingdom didn't win, Zelda didn't get the prize, but just about everyone is happy here. I want to talk a little bit more about Larian's big win, but also about some of the brand new announcements at the Game Awards, specifically RPGs or PC-centric titles. The only thing that could have stopped Baldur's Gate 3 winning at the Game Awards was the industry deciding it wasn't mainstream enough. Over the years, there has been a big push by the mainstream publishers to make single-player games overly cinematic with cutscenes and set pieces, often taking a front seat over the gameplay. Gamers aren't having it though. Even if the mainstream industry wants to market cinematic games as the be-all and end-all, Baldur's Gate 3 has still shined, selling a gazillion copies and finding success everywhere. It's not purely CRPG players who like it either. It's picked up a massive audience everywhere and the industry had to respect it, giving Larian their deserved award. There was some minor concern that Alan Wake 2 would win after picking up the Game of the Year title in Time magazine, and while it's a good game, it's just not the game that everyone's talking about, and I think just about everyone feels that the right game has come out on top. Baldur's Gate 3 did also pick up the Best Community Support Award, probably not a hard category to win given that Destiny 2 was also nominated, a live service title that genuinely treats its fans like brainless lemmings. Neil Newbin, the voice of Astarion in Baldur's Gate, he did win his Best Performance Award over the likes of Idris Elba, pretty well deserved. And there was also a community-voted Game of the Year award, which also went to Baldur's Gate 3. I do find it interesting that the community-voted award is treated like an unimportant gimmick, a bit of a side category. Again, these awards, they don't really mean anything, it's just a bit of fun, but what the fans think is really all that matters at the end of the day. Just because someone is a games journalist, for instance, and they're on the Game Awards panel, that does not really mean that their opinion holds some special weight. I did also see this one do the rounds online. Best Development Studio Layoffs of 2023. You'd probably have to give this one to Unity for their self-sabotage, that was pretty impressive, but maybe Paradox Interactive can get the award next year and fire anyone responsible for all that happened with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. I do get the sense that the elitists on the Game Awards panel, they were probably desperate to give Game of the Year to Alan Wake 2, just based on how many awards that game won in other categories. Again, I'm not throwing shade on Alan Wake, it is good, but it is also more in line with what the mainstream industry seems to want a game to be like. Story-focused over gameplay and very accessible. For instance, Alan Wake 2 won the Best Game Direction Award, the Narrative Award, and also they won for Art Direction over Baldur's Gate 3. Maybe some of those are fair enough, but I really have to question game direction. With the amount of moving parts in Baldur's Gate 3, it must have taken incredible direction and outstanding leadership, which Larian absolutely delivered on. If the Game Awards actually meant something, then I'd probably be mad. Overall, this is all positive though, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty more excuses in the near future to celebrate and talk about Baldur's Gate 3. For now though, I do want to show you some of the bigger PC and RPG-centric announcements from this awards night. Arcane Studios were expected to make an appearance at this show. They did, but it wasn't in the way that was expected. There were a ton of Dishonored 3 rumors doing the rounds, and fans were pretty pumped. After the diabolical Redfall release, another Dishonored would have been a pretty safe bet for the studio, and while I understand that different teams made these series, Arcane as a brand has been damaged no matter what way you look at it, and they do need a big win. Rather than a Dishonored announcement though, what we're getting is a video game based on Marvel's Blade. This is yet another superhero video game. Surely there's not enough of them around. And apparently it has only just started development. That's a little bit odd to me, as Deathloop, this team's previous title, that came out in September 2021, and yet they've apparently only just started work on a new game 2+ years later. I get that Deathloop probably had patches and the Xbox port that they were working on, and they might have taken some time, but you would have thought that the majority of the team would have been able to move on to something new by now. It does make me think that the Dishonored 3 rumors actually had some weight to them, and at some point it was maybe cancelled due to not being as much of a sure win as developing a game in the Marvel universe. And maybe it wasn't even cancelled. Maybe they just put it on ice while they focus on this Marvel project. I guess if they are thinking this is the game that's going to bring them financial success, perhaps that could age badly for them given how poorly Marvel films are doing in the box office lately. As for the game, all we got was a cinematic trailer and certainly no release date. It has been described as a third-person action-adventure, which does sound like a bit of a departure from Arcane's previous first-person immersive sims that they're known for, but aside from that, we know basically nothing. Hearing that it is in third person does concern me a little bit though, as the last thing I'd want from this team is just their answer to, say, the Marvel Spider-Man games, an open world title with all the same tropes as 90% of most open world games that we've gotten over the last decade. I just think Arcane historically have been a bit more unique than that, and hopefully this is just a poorly worded piece of marketing, and the final product is a genuine immersive sim experience that just happens to use the Blade property. I mean, that's something that has happened before. If you look at Prey, if you look at Deathloop from Arcane, they were marketed like action games, and yet what we got were pretty cool, pretty unique immersive sims, so maybe this could be similar. What I will say though is I just wish more gaming IPs were given the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet. Seeing more and more studios move from genuine video game series to instead trying to cash in on movies, it's not a great direction, and while we've always had movie tie-ins, if you go back to the early 2000s, they were usually saved for the bargain bins, or maybe the landfills in the case of E.T. the game. I'll give Arcane a chance though. This is the Lion team who did Dishonored and Deathloop. They supposedly had nothing to do with the abomination that was Redfall, so we'll play the wait and see game with this one. Up next, a studio headed by former BioWare developers announced Exodus, which is a sci-fi RPG starring Matthew McConaughey. Hearing ex-BioWare, it's a little bit sketchy because it's been over a decade since that studio actually put out any good games. However, the studio head appears to be James Olin, who previously worked on the original Baldur's Gate games and also Dragon Age Origins, so at least there's a little bit of promise there. Some interviews with the team have started to do the rounds, and one thing they do make clear is the world is handcrafted. Was this a dig at Starfield? I hope so, it deserves to be stomped on. In fact, they also scoffed at the idea of procedural generation, so it seems they are doing the smart thing. They are staying far away from any Bethesda influence. Comparisons with Mass Effect have of course done the rounds, and that's okay. If we got a space RPG that was comparable to the first Mass Effect, I'd be fine with it. Space RPGs still have plenty of untapped potential, which is why people were excited about Starfield in the first place. These games just need to be done competently, and hopefully with an RPG focus, not a pure action focus like the Mass Effect sequels. The trailer does seemingly show off action-focused gameplay, and there's certainly no release date yet, but it could be worth keeping an eye on. An unexpected interesting announcement was the first Berserker, Khazan. This seems to be a Souls-like action RPG by a Korean studio, and it's got a bit of a Sekiro and a cartoon art style mashed together. It is being published by Nexon, who are a very scummy Japanese publisher, but they have been known to often be hands-off with some of their single-player titles, so hopefully this means it could be good. Soulslikes have had some recent success with titles like Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen, so if they can get it right, I'll be interested. Some of you may remember Ori and the Blind Forest as well as its sequel, Will of the Wisps. That team, Moon Studios, are currently developing an action RPG called No Rest for the Wicked. The art style, it's very good, but it is a bit of a shame to me that it seems to be a Diablo-like rather than something a little bit more unique. I'd much prefer a handcrafted, isometric Metroidvania over just another Diablo clone, as the studio does have the talent to do something that at least I feel would be more original. There was absolutely the opportunity here for us to get a 3D Metroidvania-like title, but it just seems like the studio, they've gone in a direction that I suppose focuses on a more long-lasting game. It probably has randomized dungeons and a lot of loot grinding, that sort of stuff. This game's probably not going to be for me. There's heaps of Diablo-likes already, such as Grim Dawn, that I just haven't played. But if you're into this sort of thing, it at least looks fantastic from a presentation standpoint, and it will probably be quite a well-made game. There were certainly some other announcements as well, such as Visions of Mana, the first new game in that series by Square Enix in 15 years, I believe it is. There was also a single-player Jurassic Park announced, which was interesting. I wouldn't have expected that, but that pretty much covers the RPGs, the PC-centric stuff. I won't go into heaps of detail about the rest of it. I'd say we're officially in the post-Baldur's Gate 3 world now that the game has gotten this year's crown, and that means we can really start thinking about what comes next. 2024 is very close. There's RPGs coming, and I really do hope that Baldur's Gate 3 leads to raised standards in the industry, now that it has been proven that a well-made game in a niche genre can still have amazing success both commercially and critically. It's probably wishful thinking to expect it to have an immediate effect, but at the very least, I'm sure there will be some developers who won't let us down. Probably indie ones. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.